Anyway,
We want to finish on time because this is our last session.
Yes. We'll miss this.
yeah, we'll get a couple more Papacy.
Pretty close to it. Last week, we talked about the 19th century papacy, which interesting was only a handful of popes. After Pius VII, there were the three very conservative popes, followed by the ultra conservative Pope Pius IX, Pio IX. Now, after this 19th century, you can see in retrospect that the papacy changes its outlook on the world. Initially, the papacy, up until the middle of the 19th century, the papacy was totally absorbed with the accumulation of territories, maintaining a good cash flow, and maintaining its lifestyle. It survived many crises. And in the 19th century, with the Industrial Revolution, the papacy began to take a look and gravitate towards the temporal happiness of men and women. No longer it was the papacy itself, no longer it was Rome only, not only was it dogma, not only was it the unity of the church, now they were assuming a totally different attitude towards the social issues of mankind. And that all began with the Industrial Revolution that began in the late 18th century in England, probably because of its industrial resources and its means of communication. So power-driven machinery took over the place of hand tools. And society went from a rural and agrarian makeup to with an economy of scarcity that is not many items available, to an urban industrial society with an economy of plenty. So that is basically what happened with the Industrial Revolution as it spread throughout Europe. Eventually there would be conflict, and this was known and this was predicted. There was no doubt about it. Why was there conflict? Oh, many reasons. The wealth was not well distributed. There were the very wealthy and there were the very poor. There were various schools of socialism. The major works were written in the mid-century. But all these things empowered the laborers and the workers. And so this led to trade unions and suffrage, universal manhood. Women in many places were not given the vote by the Industrial Revolution. As you know, women in the United States could only vote in federal elections in 1920. And in a place like Portugal, did not allow women to vote until 1970s. And so it's so universal suffrage was really not the rule, but rather the exception. On the other hand, there were political parties, particularly Catholic parties, which were allowed by the more modern popes. After Pius IX, the conclave elected Leo XIII. Leo XIII was a fragile little old man that was not supposed to last very long. He was elected because they needed a transitional pope. That is, all the kingdoms of Europe, all the monarchs of Europe could not get together on a common candidate. So they elected somebody to which there were few objections. That was basically the idea. So Leo the 13th continued the struggle against socialism and against the Freemasons. And this comes to our day. I remember in boarding school being told that the primary reason for the existence of Freemasons was the destruction of the Catholic Church and the papers. And there was a big lodge in my hometown. And I could not understand how these nice people who got together to smoke a cigar and have dinner once a week wanted the destruction of the Catholic Church. But Leo the 13th also continued the doctrine of ultramontanism. Ultramontanism, that is the wind blowing from beyond the mountains. Centralized government in church in Rome of the church and authority of the Pope. He did open the Vatican archives to scholars, even though to this point, to this day, it is very difficult to get into the archives. One cannot just go there and say, I want to see the minutes on Galileo's trial. No, you have to say exactly which book you want, what page, I need to look at the book. Oh, you have to tell me exactly what page. So they make it very, very difficult to look at the original documents, but they are there. They have been preserved.
They haven't put them in electronic form.
No, not yet. They are the originals. Maybe they have facsimiles. They probably have facsimiles. And maybe those are the ones that they distribute for inspection or for research. He did promote astronomy. You know that there is an observatory in the Vatican City with which they can look at the stars. You didn't know that? Yeah, oh yeah. It's a big observatory with a big telescope, huge lens. And his encyclicals, and this is what makes him memorable, were devoted to the social order. Up until this time, the papacy was all about itself. Now, with this little hope that wasn't supposed to last that long, all of a sudden, the church is looking at others. The church is looking at people, not just Catholics, workers in general, the social order. And that was the big push of Pope Leo the 13th. His biggest encyclical was Rerum Novarum. Rerum Novarum means of the new things. He was sensing the change in things in the life of Europe, the change in the life of society. So he wrote this encyclical about the new things. It's a shame that we are limited by time, because I have in my files a set of 6 beautiful slides about Rerum Novarum, used whenever we have more time. But in any case, the encyclical specified that private property was legitimate. Catholics were entitled to own property, as opposed to communism. Communism, you're not supposed to own property. Catholics are permitted, or it's reasonable and correct to own property. On the other hand, workers should be paid a just wage. Workers have rights, including the formation of unions. And it castigated capitalism because it did not provide social justice to the working class. And that is an argument that has survived to our day and age. Atheism was castigated too. And Catholics, unlike Pio Nono, was encouraged to form their own socialist and Catholic parties and labor unions to demand social justice.
Could you go over that first point and just enumerate what social responsibilities in general were expected from those that had private possessions?
The social responsibilities were very generalized: justice, attention, equality, a fair wage, attention to their needs, anticipation of future growth and the like. In Germany, or what is now Germany, Social Security started at this time, and also retirement benefits. So those were the things that
They say that a lot of these ideas came from people with wealth.
the idea probably came from a lot of people, from many different sources, and they just pulled them together. See, the Pope doesn't sit down and write things longhand himself. All these encyclicals are written by associates, scribes, counselors, and then finally signed by the Pope. But these are works that come from many different sources. That's why it takes so long between one encyclical and the other. Often they are working on several encyclicals at the time. So that's the beauty and valor of Rerum Novarum. The little fragile man went on to live for about 20 some years, much to the chagrin of the cardinals that had elected him as a transitory pope. He continued the legend of being a prisoner of the Vatican. He did not want to step out of the Vatican. Why? He knew that there had been an attempt on the Pope before. He knew that the emperor had taken 2 popes prisoner. He knew that the Secretary of the Interior had been assassinated next to him. Of course, he did not feel free or safe in Rome. So he stayed at the Vatican, where he was cloistered and secured from any terrorism. He did forbid Catholics from participating in Italian elections and insisted on the primacy of the papacy, particularly in relations with the Eastern Church. I am the Pope. The Pope has to be top dog.
So forbidding participating in the Italian election, any particular reasons for that? Seem like, why would he forbid participating in the Italian election? That seems odd.
They were at odds. The Italian government and the papacy were at odds with each other. The Italian government had gone through a lot of trouble with the law of guarantees. They were guaranteed the security. They were guaranteed diplomatic relations. They were guaranteed safety. They were guaranteed minimum salary for everybody. The Italian government really went way beyond what it had to please the Pope. And the Pope said, no way. So they were at loggerheads, and they were at each other's throats. And for that reason, the Pope said, no, don't participate in any elections, particularly in any elections in the former papal estates. Those belong to us. If there are going to be any elections there, we are going to run them, and we're not going to run any.
Okay.
So that's the reason. His biggest blunder was dealing with the Church of England. The little fragile Pope decided to declare invalid all the priests since the 1600s. ordained by the Church of England. In other words, all these priests and bishops and archbishops that have been around for 300 years are pretenders. They are not valid. Their sacraments are not valid. Their final absolutions are not valid. Their marriages are not valid. So he didn't make any friends in England over that. Not at all. He also appointed a new biblical commission and another list of forbidden books. So even though this man was a giant as far as social thinking, to the inner workings of the church, he was very, very backwards. Extremely backwards. So Leo the 13th finally died. And still the monarchs of Europe would not arrive at a compromise point. They wanted a conservative, no, Leo was too conservative. They wanted a liberal, no, Leo was too liberal. So they finally gave up and came up with the candidacy of Pope Pius X. Pope Pius X was a nice man. He was a good man. He was a parish priest. He was the kind of parish priest that the Italians call by their name. They used to call him Don Beppo. Everybody knew him as Don Beppo. Why? Because he was the kind of priest that hugged children, that knew everybody in his parish, that was always available, that really empathized with people. So Don Beppo had become a bishop, and very rapidly cardinal in Venice. Because nobody had any major objections to Don Beppo, because Don Beppo had not done much except be himself, but be a really nice man, a holy man, but a really nice, compassionate, reasonable person. So as Don Beppo encouraged frequent communion, and this is why we now have 7-year-olds making their first communion. Before that, people had to be close to their 20s to go for their first communion. And also the first confession. I remember being a 7-year-old disobeying my mother in order to have something to say when I went to confession. My mother would say, would you mind handing me that thing over there? I said, no. So I could go to confession and have something to say. I disobeyed my parents.
We were told just to confess old sins, that we didn't have anything to do with brand.
Some memories, huh? Sorry. So he also decreased the size of the Roman court, revised canon law, came up with a new missal and a breviary. He did a lot of little nice things. And then he went back. He decided, or his advisors decided, that he should condemn modernism, whatever that is. He came out publicly against democracy, socialism, capitalism, progress, science, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, evolution, church historians, theologians, common sense, everything.
Yeah, what's supposed to happen?
He came out against everything.
What did he believe in? That's what I was.
He did not. He believed he was an anti-believer. He was of these people that are not in favor of anything, but against many things. He favored the League of St. Pius V, which was an ultra-conservative organization. And he supported the Action Française. You know, that this eventually was associated with the fascists in Italy and Germany, and particularly France. So Don Beppo really went from being a very nice, liberal, compassionate man to be an ultra right winger. He also demanded that all priests and bishops take an oath against modernism. And whenever you have people take an oath, there's going to be a lot of backlash. He claimed that the existence of God can be proven by natural reason, that the church is an institution was founded by Jesus himself, that faith involves a real assent of the intellect to truths presented from outside the believer, and on and on and on. So the end result was that he really discouraged research. The previous pope had opened up the archives and encouraged limited research, but Pius X really discouraged research and fostered animosity between the right wingers and the left wingers.
I mean, is there any possibility that he lost his mental capacity and his advisors took over?
Oh, but the advisors, of course, look at former presidents.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so many of these older popes really kind of lost it as they grew older and older.
Right.
And their advisors really ruled the place.
Because this seems to be such a transition from when he started to this.
Well, notice how many times that has happened during the Great Western Schism.
Mm-hmm.
The bishop of the Italian groups, Bartolomeo, the one who got into fights with the French cardinals because of the 7-course dinners. Of course, he changed from one end to the other. Pius IX was very, very liberal. He became very, very conservative. So this has happened many times in the history of the papacy, probably due to age.
I'm concerned about not concerned, but I'm interested in the idea that transparency in terms of opening up the archives. I sort of went back and forth as though there are things in the archives that certain popes felt would be bad to release or bad to get out in the open.
There probably are. There probably are a lot of embarrassing documents. Imagine 2,000 years.
The Epstein files.
And that would explain a lot. That's what they are.
And there's also a lot of favoritism. Like certain scholars have relatively more access to the files than others.
You think they would go back though and say, anything 1,000 years old, won't release. I mean, but it seems like they want to hold everything and just release little bits, pieces of things that they feel comfortable.
We haven't seen anything yet.
with.
More to come. So Gambetta died after about 10 years. And he was followed by Benedict the 15th. His name was De La Chiesa of the church. De La Chiesa had been trained to be a diplomat or a pope. He had attended that school in the Vatican where they teach them diplomacy and languages and history, and they travel all over again, all over the world. In other words, he was also a compromised pope, but he was a diplomat, a career diplomat. They knew that the there was going to be a general conflict. Actually, the war had just started when he was elected. He immediately declared neutrality. He was neither with the Central Powers or with allies, and invested a lot in relief efforts and in the care of prisoners of war of both sides. And it is rumored that he almost broke the Vatican funds. The soldiers with tuberculosis were a particular problem because nobody wanted them, and the care was expensive. So the Pope and the papacy and Switzerland negotiated certain agreements by which at least some of these soldiers with tuberculosis were treated in Switzerland, where it was felt that the rarefied air was good for the management of tuberculosis.
You know, you talk about this declared neutrality. Did he at least speak out against war?
Well, he didn't have any troops. He didn't have any land. He didn't have any kingdom. He just said, the Vatican, the papacy is neutral. We don't go with either side. Both sides pray to the same God.
But I mean, war is, I mean, that's not going with either side when you're speaking out against war. It's wrong. No.
And Italy eventually sided with the Allies. Does anybody know why? Because the Allies promised Italy a lot of cash and a lot of territory in what is now the Alto Adige and the Veneto, just north of Venice. All that area belonged to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And the Allies promised the Italians, you come in with us, at the end of the war, we'll give you these territories. And these territories remain Italian to this day, even though the locals speak German. And the wine is very much German, and the food is very much German.
How did the papacy benefit from that? And how did the papacy benefit from those new territories?
Actually, they didn't. Anything in favor of Italy was something against the papacy.
They supported it, so,
When he said Italy,
Italy.
not the papers.
oh, I'm sorry, Italy supported it.
Italy switched to the Allies
Okay,
in order
Got
to get the property land.
so it wasn't something that, oh,
No, it's for-
But going back to the question, like I also wanted to ask the same. Like it's one thing is to declare neutral, then I understand, but not to have a position. And with Vatican, that's like they didn't have position over American Revolution, no position over the war, no position over any political issue, and it keeps going on. Now maybe last two popes get more prominent political stand, but
Much more has changed a lot more.
yes.
And we're gonna get to that at the end of the.
But why would they be like, if they're popes for everybody, I mean, you have to condemn the evil.
Maybe he didn't have anything better to do that day. He decided to go that day. Seems like knows what.
condemn evil, you've got to pick which side is more evil.
Well, in
So
war,
then
it's
neutrality
very clear in
kind of-
war who is evil, the one who invades, but,
But then your neutrality goes away. So
Why?
it's, well, I mean, if you declare neutrality, it means you're not going to lean to one side or the other.
but if you're the one who represents the church and the God and preaching of the love for people, I mean, it's very easy where you stand.
At that time, the papacy was a kingdom without any land.
And
It hardly had any money. So the Pope's statements were really worthless. Didn't have an army, didn't have anything to provide one way or another.
well, it's not worthless because they had people, the congregations, people and Christians who are part of the church. So that's the biggest value. You tell your people, everybody opposed the war.
You're very correct. They have people and they have information.
No.
So whoever Pope had, or whoever side the papacy was, had an enormous intelligence
Yeah,
source.
they still do.
I mentioned those Christians were on both sides.
Yes, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
so-
You can call on people to just be against war. In like this, you like poor people didn't have any sides to protect them. That's what I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
That's kind of the history of war. I mean, you're being very rational. There's nothing rational about war except greed.
No, I'm trying to find the reason for existence of the church. And several times, I think Mike and others said how the church existed for 2,000 years, having this kind of position when you don't stand for your people. That's my.
So I think we gotta be careful of, because I'm not sure we know exactly how he felt about war in general. He was neutral here.
But he didn't do anything. I mean, I don't care how
Well,
he felt. What he
What's the
did.
last bullet? Wait a minute.
Yeah, that's where we're getting to. The Pope did offer a peace plan in 1917, which of course both sides neglected and discarded rapidly. Because the Allies thought that the Pope was in favor of the Central Powers, and the
Exactly.
Central Powers thought that the Pope was favoring the Allies. So this got anywhere, but he made a good effort, and the good effort was very, very, very noble and very fair. Let's go back to the territories before the war. Let's make peace. Let's go back to a good Europe. But the First World War was really barbarous, with enormous carnage. Millions of soldiers died terribly. Trench warfare, war in many continents. Several monarchs and empires fell. The Austro-Hungarian Empire fell. The German Empire fell. The Ottoman Empire fell. New countries were created, like Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Romania was enlarged. And generally, people became very skeptical about the future that we can see in the literature in the 1920s, in the art of the 1920s, in the theater of the 1920s. They were all also full of doubts about the value of religion and the absence or the existence of God. If God exists, how could he or she have allowed all this carnage, all the deaths? The Versailles Treaty didn't help things much. And then came the Russian Revolution and the rise of fascism. If you remember the lectures on fascism, fascism would have never occurred the way it did had it not been for the Russian Revolution.
Is
That's
the
debatable.
Industrial Revolution sort of the linchpin here? That prior to that, we had a certain type of society. After the Industrial Revolution, we had a major shift in terms of wealth and
Yes.
power. And was that a major impetus for all of these changes that, like, I never fully understood what, if you ask somebody in World War I, why are you fighting? I've never quite figured out why they were fighting.
Because Germany was this major power and was confined into a small territory. That's very simple. They wanted more.
Nationalism.
So the question, Germany was looking to broaden their land holdings, which caused the war. Everybody else went in
Isn't
to
this war caused by
react.
some sort of somebody getting assassinated? Well, that was translated a bunch of things.
That's
Yeah, but that's
Right.
That was Austro-Hungarian.
Like the bomb was set to go off. That was just what the
That was the trigger, yeah.
But
And you had empires at that point which were like becoming obsolete. So you have new powers, you have, as you said, industrial, that they changed democratic.
It looks like a lot is happening
Yeah.
during this period of time. literal catalysts for these changes.
Let's finish up with Benedict XV. So after the war, he asked all parties to reconcile. And he supported the League of Nations, which the United States, never joined. He did embark on some diplomatic activity, but the papacy remained really isolated and marginalized. And it was broke because of all the help that he had given prisoners of war and soldiers suffering from tuberculosis. He did allow the Italians to form a party, a political party, and allowed Catholics to vote. The other thing that he did very smartly was to put an end to the infighting between the conservatives and the liberals in the Catholic Church. Enough is enough, he said. Go say your prayers and leave your brothers alone.
But would you say that this Pope Benedict was actually more pro-Freemasons?
Would I say that he
Was more towards Freemasons? And why I'm asking, you said he supported the League of Nations. League of Nations was predominantly American idea, which at that point we had President Roosevelt, who we all know he was a Freemason, 32nd degree, and the idea of League of Nations and one government and the world as whole, it's a Freemason idea.
it's a great idea that didn't work out.
Well, I know, but I'm saying that the idea behind the League of Nations, that was it, like one governing body, globalization, if you want, the way that we call it today. But the Pope obviously supported it.
Yeah, the Pope did support it.
But do you think, however, that because Roosevelt was a Freemason, that necessarily equated that the Pope supporting the League of Nations, that there was a connection? I mean, it was his membership and he had a certain philosophy, but it doesn't mean that he necessarily hated Catholics.
No, I never said that. I just,
Oh, but that was the thing about Freemasons, right? Is they didn't
I
like.
don't think that Freemasons ever hated Catholics, since that was used, as you were saying, that was like used and thought, like,
Oh,
they were very religious people too. So there's many different ways to believe in God and to practice what you believe.
Right.
According to me, I don't know. It's not necessarily just that they're against the church. I never
Okay.
felt that they're against the church.
so I don't know that much about Freemasons. I just thought we said earlier that one of the things about Freemasons was that they wanted the dissolution of Catholics.
That's what the
Was
Pope
that-
was saying. Do you really feel that they really wanted to do?
Well, I kind of question it just because, I mean, George Washington was also a Freemason.
Yes.
And he supported freedom of religion.
Oh, but freedom of religion, it's a noble idea. Like there is a one God, but how we communicate, it's a, I'm not a
It
Catholic.
is one of the principles
But
of our nation.
That doesn't make me a bad Christian.
Right.
Or even if I'm a Muslim, I would think like that's a freedom of religion. Like I can,
Absolutely. But it's one of the principles our nation was built on, right? And we've got our struggles, and we certainly have factions that think we're supposed to be a white Christian nation.
Yeah.
But most of us believe in freedom of religion, regardless of what form it takes. Right? And it is still one of the principles for our nation.
Yeah,
I hope
so-
it remains that way, but
so I don't think that was against the
right.
Catholic Church.
Raymond, didn't you say that it was the papacy that said the Freemasons were against them?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so
I
I
don't-
misunderstood.
Yeah, it was generally believed, it was kind of like, yeah, we don't like them, so, yeah, some of that fake news kind of thing.
Oh, good.
The
My
Freemasons
misunderstanding, I apologize.
traditionally have been anti-clerical. That has been the option.
Okay.
Not so much about faith and behavior, but it's the power of the clergy. That's what the Freemasons have always come against. The point here is this is something that you should make a note of, because your grandchildren will ask you about this sooner or later. The impact of the Russian Revolution on communism on the 20th century as a whole. Russia was a big, big country, and still is a big, big country with many, many resources, a very highly educated nobility, many traditions, a strong, largest army in Europe, a very wealthy church. And this huge country in Europe that sent all the children to be educated in France and drank Veuve Clicquot champagne by the shipful. All this country now has fallen to socialism. Not only that, the socialists were a definite minority. They were never a majority, even in Russia. How could this happen? On top of that, the teachings of Russian communism were really left-wing. Way, way out. The government would own all the means of production. There would be no religion. None. No religion whatsoever. Religion was to be abolished. The weak work was to be changed. Everything was going to be a paradise of the workers. How would this happen to such a big country?
Because of poverty.
Could be.
I mean, they were, the main point of that revolution is that Russia didn't follow the development of the Western world. And still, that's the main issue now, because while the Industrial Revolution had moved the other countries in Europe forward and going towards democratization, in Russia, they were in feudalism still. And you have extremely, as you said, extremely wealthy church, extremely wealthy people, and extremely poor common.
You're very correct. Thanks for bringing that up. Bob.
And-
Yes, go ahead.
And uneducated people, I mean, the power was in the church. And the people were generally uneducated except for the higher ups. So they were poor, most of
The
them.
nobility was very wealthy
Yeah,
Yes,
and very well educated.
Yeah.
The poor were very poor.
yeah,
and church extremely well strong.
Just remember Dr. Zhivago, the movie or the book. That's very, very, very accurate. So this radical socialist government was totalitarian, atheist, and godless. And they were committed to the destruction of religion and faith. So the papacy, the Catholic Church, the churches in the West of Europe aligned themselves with everything that was anti-communist. Everything that was anti-communist was good for them. Well, maybe not so good, but certainly better than communists. The Tsar was murdered. If the Tsar was murdered, nobody was safe. Life was not worth living for many people. So in 1920, as the Vittoriano monument here was being built, the papacy was a small kingdom without any land. No diplomatic standing, no ambassadors, no temporal powers, no income. That's the other thing Italy forbid the parishes to send income to the Pope. Peter Spence, none of that. They were kept out of the Versailles Conference, and the governments of Italy and the papacy were always hostile to each other. And again, there was this rumor that Germany would return Rome to the papacy once Italy was defeated, if the papacy declared in favor of Germany. If you're not with us at the end of the war, we win, we'll give you back Rome. That was all a rumor. That never really materialized. But then the Victoriano monument really didn't help. You've seen that, how white that marble is, how it really stands out right in front of the Piazza Venezia and Palazzo Venezia. And if you take a look at this view of Rome from the Dome of St. Peter's, you can see the colonnade, Bernini's colonnade, the obelisk, the Via della Conciliazione, about which we will talk a little bit more, this Tiber River. In any event, what happens is that the Pope who lives over here, or has lived over here, whenever he opens his window in the morning, what's the first thing he sees? Yeah, the monument to the unification of Italy. And they built it there in that position with that kind of marble to put it in the face of the Pope every single day of his life. Eventually, the Pope passed away, and by then, Pope Pius XI was ready to become Pope. Pope Pius XI had very little personality. He was kind of like a dud as far as a person was concerned. But diplomatically and intellectually, he was quite pugnacious. He had been, he had 3 doctorates. He had been the leader of the Ambrosian Library. He had been also director of the Vatican Libraries. In other words, this man was a high-powered intellectual. And he was confident enough in himself that he was able to bring into the inner circle other people from other cardinals, other bishops that could be of service to the church.
And what was his nationality?
What was his?
His nationality.
Nationality.
Oh, he was Italian. They were all Italian. Yes, I'm sorry. So he brought in Pietro Gaspari and Eugenio Pacelli. Pacelli turned out to be Pope Pius XII. And Gaspari was the one who negotiated the Lateran Treaty with Mussolini's government. This is an authentic photograph of Gaspari signing the Lateran Accord. And next to him is Benito Mussolini. What was the accord? The papacy recognized the Kingdom of Italy. Up until then, the papacy did not even want to mention the Kingdom of Italy. No, they were fighting all the time. To mention another government would mean to recognize it. Finally, with the Latin agreements, they recognized the Kingdom of Italy. On the other hand, the Kingdom of Italy would recognize Vatican City State, a totally new state, a totally new country, a totally new independent political space. As a sovereign state independent of Italy with extraterritorial jurisdiction of various properties. In other words, the Vatican City State could own land and property outside of its inner core. That's how they own Castel Gandolfo. That's how they own the basilicas in Rome. That's how they own the University of Sapienza University in Rome and other properties, which is nothing new. The papacy used to own property in France. Yes, please.
Well, but that was my question, whether with this treaty, all the properties that the papacy had in other countries was also accepted as
Right.
extraterritorial.
Yes, the papacy could own land outside.
Okay.
But own land doesn't mean it was part of the country. It's still part of the country. It's physically.
Right.
So like Castle Gandolfo, is
Yeah.
in the Italian land. It's not part of the.
No, I know that. I'm just questioning, for example, when you are an embassy and you have your embassy in another country,
Right.
that's your territory.
Right.
Extra,
That part is.
yes, that's what I'm saying, whether that also means the same for the Vatican.
Now, the treaty also specified that the Vatican would be neutral in all conflicts and keep its mouth shut, not mediate unless asked by all parties.
So that's why they didn't get political with the
That's
lawyers.
it. That's exactly it. And then the Vatican was given 1.75 billion lira in compensation. Close to $100 million at that time, which was an enormous amount of money. That money was invested in a corporation run by the Italian government that built most apartment of the apartment buildings in Rome at this time.
Wow.
Is that a requirement or is that a choice that the Vatican made?
I'm sorry.
Was this sort of a part of the deal that they had to invest in this infrastructure?
No. It
So
was,
they
it was not,
chose to do
it
that.
was not beforehand. Afterwards, Mussolini decided to rebuild Rome, built many new apartment buildings, and we'll see why. So those monies went into that and created a lot of problems. And a lot of wealth for the Catholic Church.
So it seems that Vatican gained a lot from this treaty. And what would you say was the value for Italian part? Like whether, I know that they, for the first time, recognized the Kingdom of Italy, but is it maybe also they were compensated because the world was getting ready for a new war and neutrality was important so that they can advance?
Well, the money that went to the Vatican was in government securities. It was not cash.
Security.
Just the government saying, we will guarantee you by the seat of our pants, 1.75 billion lira.
So it'd be like US government bonds kind of thing?
If it was something, they call them security, it would be like bonds. But,
So they didn't actually put money into their bank account?
but all that money was reinvested and Rome was built. This is why there are so many buildings in Rome now with the papal insignia.
And after that, after this treaty, so Vatican doesn't have any financial obligation towards Italy.
No,
So everything is to,
no, but the Vatican said, worked, as we will see, as an offshore bank.
Yeah.
In Italy. This is part of the original agreement. This is a plot or a plan of Vatican City State. The telescope is over here in this corner.
So they actually got some land out of this deal? Or was it all land that was already part of the Vatican? Was the Vatican territory actually expanded?
Was the Vatican territory?
Yeah, the Vatican City, was it expanded beyond its original
No,
size? Okay.
no. They built a railroad station down here. The Stazione. That was built by the Kingdom of Italy. And it's in this lot that the buses leave you when you go on a tour. If you go by metro, the metro station is in this corner, and this plaza here is where the streetcars stop. So the Italian government really invested a lot into the Vatican and the Vatican environment. If you want to go to the Vatican Museum, you usually go through the colonnade and walk all the way around here, uphill, and then enter finally over here. So it's a way.
Was another reason for making this deal that Mussolini thought of this as a good political move to get a lot of Catholics in the country to.
You're getting too good.
I'm just guessing because
Getting
there
so
didn't seem to be anything so tangible for Mussolini out of this.
You are getting so good. One more, and I'll give you the.
It's like the,
Thank you very much for your interest. We're going right to that issue. So the treaty the Lateran Treaty specified various laws that were repealed. Catholicism was then recognized as the official religion in Italy, and the priests and bishops and archbishops were paid a stipend. There would be obligatory instruction in secondary schools of religion. The clergy would be loyal to the civil government. In other words, don't go up on the pulpit and criticize the government. The Catholic Popular Party was disbanded, and that was a feature of many concordats, many agreements between governments and the Vatican. We agree on making this the religion, okay. In return, the political party has to go. Same thing happened in Germany. The political party Catholic party has to go. And also they built the Via della Conciliazione. This is the view again from top of the Vatican in 1930. You can see the colonnade, the Bernini, the obelisk. This is the Pasetto. If you read that book, Angels and Demons by Dan Brown, remember that they whisked the Pope over to the Castel Sant'Angelo through the Pasetto. The Pasetto is this passageway right through here, goes all the way to the Castel Sant'Angelo. It's an escape route. It's always been an escape route and has been used a number of times. The point that I'm trying to make here is right down the middle here is a group of 7 city blocks full of apartments. So what did Mussolini do with that area? He destroyed it. And he moved out hundreds of families to other apartments and built the Via della Conciliazione, going from the Vatican to the Castel Sant'Angelo. This is the Tiber River up here, and this is the Ponte Sant'Angelo. So if you go by foot up here, you cross over here, turn left, and go directly to the Vatican. So this is what Mussolini did, was build the Via della Conciliazione to commemorate the agreement between the government of the fascists and the papacy. Now we get to the slide that you were anticipating. Why were the two parties in agreement finally? They were probably too tired of being at each other's throats and decided, let's settle this. Number one, they realized, just like Napoleon had done, the importance of religion to the people of the country. Napoleon had done the same thing. He realized that religion was important to the people of France. And for that reason, he had engaged the papacy and developed certain agreements. It certainly increased the legitimacy and the credibility of Mussolini's government. The papacy was broke. The papacy needed money. The papacy had been marginalized at the Versailles Conference. It had not even been invited to the Versailles Conference. And most important, it was the fear of communism. That big country of Russia had turned communist. Mussolini was a fierce anti-communist.
But at the same time, they use the same tactic because both in Germany and in Italy, they appeal to the poor people, and they were, in a way, socialist nationalists, social nationalists. They were against Christians. That's why a Christian party had to be dissolved. So
that is generally correct. Even though fascism appealed much more to the middle class than to the poor people. But yes, you are very correct. Thank you. So the fear of communism, once again, has to be considered as to one of the reasons why the Catholic Church, the papacy, and the Italian fascists came to an agreement. They felt that they could handle
Yeah,
the fascists. They felt that it was better than communism. They felt that Mussolini would protect the church and the papacy from communism. So for these reasons, they decided to settle. So concordatos or agreements were political treaties that defined the relationship of governments to religion. There were many concordats in the 1930s. This one is being signed by Eugenio Pacelli, the future Pope Pius XII, and sitting next to him is Fritz von Papen. Von Papen was the second in power in Hitler's government. Von Papen was the vice chancellor when Hitler was appointed chancellor. Von Papen was a religious man, was a Catholic, and he was found not guilty at Nuremberg.
Wow.
So von Papen was a good Catholic who dealt with Pacelli. They were friends. They knew each other very, very well. They had had dinner with each other many times. They had gone to the opera many times, whatnot. So the concordats agreed on education, mutual respect, political parties, which again meant no Catholic political party, and provided recognition and legitimacy for the Nazi government. They could boast, hey, we have an agreement with the popes. Pius XI had a number of encyclicals, including two classical ones. One here, Non abbiamo bisogno, we do not have any need. That was written in Italian, not in Latin, and addressed to the people of Italy. Was very critical of the fascist government and its injustices. He also wrote one in German. Let's see if I do not assassinate his name. McBrenneter Ford. How's that? You said that?
Yeah.
Thank you for your support. It really condemned Nazism as racist and anti-Christian. But it stopped short of really attacking the parties or the individuals within the parties. When he died in 1939, the Second World War was about to start, and Eugenio Pacelli was really the candidate that everybody expected to win. He had been bred for the papacy since he was a child. As a youngster, he had been taken to see the Pope because his father was the Pope's physician. So when Pacelli went into the seminary, he immediately was groomed for a higher office. He had been Secretary of State for 9 years. He had traveled all over the world. He had met with Churchill. He had met with Roosevelt. He had dined with Mussolini. He had gone to the opera with Hitler or to the Valkyrie in the Wagnerian theater. In other words, he knew all the players. So he had been nuncio, ambassador to Munich and to Berlin, too. He had been attacked by the communists. So he knew that the communists meant business and were violent. Another thing about Pacelli was that he had lived in Germany so many years that he liked Germany. Some of his biographers say that he loved Germany. He was fluent in German and in English and in Italian. So he felt very, very comfortable in Germany. And he liked the people, particularly the south of Germany where he had been nuncio. The only person that he did not know very well was Stalin. And he probably knew as much as could be known about Stalin from his spies all over creation. The question always comes up, and we can discuss this forever, but we won't. Did Pacelli know about the Holocaust? How could he have not known? He had to know. He had to know. He had to know that there was people being killed in Poland. There were people being killed in Russia. There were people being killed everywhere. He knew the tactics of the Nazis. He had been attacked by the Russians. He knew there was a war. What could he do? He could complain. He could excommunicate Hitler and Mussolini. And then what would happen? He knew Hitler could very easily take over the Vatican in a couple of hours. Actually, Pacelli lived with a signed resignation. He had told his people, if they ever come for me, pull out the document. It's already just dated. It's already there. He lived with his suitcases packed because he was ready to be taken away anytime. He knew what had happened to Pope Pius VI and Pope Pius VII. He knew about the attack on the Pope at Anagni. He knew about all those things in history. He knew how delicate his position was, particularly once Mussolini was taken down. As long as Mussolini was in Rome, was in power, the papacy was safe. Actually, as long as Mussolini was in power, no Jews were deported from Rome. Only after Mussolini was taken down. Once Mussolini or Mussolini's protection was gone, he was on his own. I personally believe that Pius was between a rock and a hard place. That he really had no good choice.
Well, his choice, according to me, was to choose between himself and the church. He could have just accepted he would be killed if he has a staff and protect the church and protect the faith and protect the humanity. He chose himself over the church, according to me.
But he chose a different direction if you read on.
There's no excuse for what Catholic Church did.
Right, the point is valid and has been argued extensively. He also knew that Hitler was capable of invading the Vatican, destroying everything, destroying the church and the papacy. And all the extermination camps, all of those are the products of British propaganda. It was a terrible position to be in. And I'm sure that Pius XII regretted that position to the end of his life.
Who was the one in the below Stalin?
Who says Mussolini?
Mussolini.
Okay.
Mussolini. That's wearing a hat for a change.
Oh, okay.
So after a war, Europe was devastated. There were millions of refugees and POWs and many problems to deal with. For example, there were bishops in Germany and Italy that had been supportive of the fascist government. And they were actual communist governments, not only in Russia, but also in Yugoslavia, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, in East Germany, in Bulgaria. This was the nightmare of having half of Europe in communist hands. On top of that, there were very strong parties, communist parties in Spain, in Italy, France, which were threatening with taking over. So World War II, the outcome was very, very unfavorable to the papacy. Pius XII had a great PR department. They really knew how to photograph him, which angles were best. And this was studied, and this was promoted. He was presented by the media as a living saint. He also proclaimed the dogma of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary in 1950. This has been the only dogma promoted or presented under the theory of infallibility. The one and only. And probably the last one too. Probably. Because you have no idea how much criticism he came to face because of that dogma. Many criticisms were, well, did the Virgin ever die? When she went to heaven, was she dead or was she alive? Well, that didn't say. Dogma didn't say. Dogma just said that in body and soul, the Virgin went to heaven. Well, the European newspapers and magazines had a heyday with them. But these are pictures of Pope Pius XII. He knew how to extend his arms like that. Look at this one with the globe behind him and the Vatican and the other towers here.
Yes.
He floated rumors that he talked to the Virgin and that he was visited by Jesus. There were very subtle rumors that were leaked out to the press that this had happened. So he was a living saint. He loved the sedia gestatoria, the ambling chair of the Pope, where he could be lifted above everybody else and moved around. When somebody called him on the phone, the person who called was supposed to be on his knees, kneeling in front of the telephone. If you left an audience, you had to walk backwards. He smelled of something different, and it turns out that he was fascinated with infection. And he had his hands sprayed with dilute Clorox several times a day to kill the bacteria. And that's why he smelled that way. Now, poor Pius XII, the living saint, when he dies, some bright Vatican doctor decides to try a new form of embalmment. So they embalmed the cadaver using this new method that didn't work. He died in the summertime, and Rome was hot. I remember I was in the 6th grade. We were following that blow by blow.
They had to display the body.
Excuse me?
Was the idea to display the body?
Yeah, they had to do that for
I mean, were they
several
gonna-
days.
Display him in a glass.
Now they do, at that time, it was an open coffin. Well, in Rome, being so hot, with the Pope not embalmed, the gas in his intestines began to expand. And the intestines broke down, and he began to make noises. Not only that, the Swiss guards that were around the body, when they heard all these noises, got sick, and several of them fainted and went to ground with their spears and shields and whatnot. So it was a bad scene for the Pope that was supposed to be a living saint. They finally had to cut it short, close the coffin, and put him away.
So you were in Italy at that time?
Did I?
No, you heard about it. He was.
Oh, okay. You said you watched it, you followed it.
No, we followed it in boarding school. Blow by blow, the conclave, the death of the Pope.
And did they televise this? 'Cause
No, there
This
was,
was before.
Before
it
television.
was 1958. There was television, but not,
Yeah.
not.
The first thing that was actually televised electronically live was Pope John the 23rd,
Yeah, I think.
right? That was Telstar. I'm a geek in technology, and they used that, and I actually remember watching that live. I was in Catholic school though. They, like when anything did do with the Pope, right? We heard blow by blow.
Yeah.
What was it?
Yeah, me too. I was, yeah.
Oh,
Talking of John the 23rd, here we come to John for the last few minutes. John was everything that Pope Pius XII was not. He was humble, he was approachable, he was short on both tongues. He liked his food a lot, jovial. He had been a diplomat too, and he knew several languages, and he could get along with people. He was very human. There's a story that he was walking around the Vatican one time, and they were kind of remodeling something, and one of the carpenters hit his thumb with a nail, with a hammer. And all kinds of terrible things came out of the carpenter's mouth. And John the 23rd went up to him and said, "Sir, why can't you just say shit like everybody else?" That's a true story about John the 23rd. There were plenty of witnesses. He was not a rabid anti-communist. Actually, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he called up Khrushchev and said, "Hi, Khrushchev, this is the Pope. Hey, cool it. Let's not go to war. Not worth it. Cool it." He also called for a synod of Roman bishops, a revision of the Code of Common Law, and an ecumenical council. This you may not know. There's a theory that Cardinal Giuseppe's theory, was actually elected in 1958 and again in 1963. But too conservative. And the other cardinals would not let him take office.
But they elected him.
He was elected by the majority. But the senior cardinals, this is a theory. The senior cardinal said, "We cannot let this happen. He is just too radical."
But is there a procedure to do that? A procedure within the,
They do a lot of things in conclave.
yeah,
They do a lot of things. And some cardinals are more powerful than others. And it could have happened. He always denied it. Siri always denied it. So officially, it did not happen. But unofficially, there has always been the rumor about Cardinal Siri. The other thing was that Pope Roncalli, John the 23rd, apparently he was a Freemason. There are documents in France that he was inducted as a Freemason in the 1940s. If that is the case, he was an illegitimate pope. Because a Freemason at that time was immediately excommunicated from the church. So if you read anywhere the theory of steady vacantism, that means the chair of Peter is vacant because no pope has been legitimate since 1958. That's just a theory. I'm throwing it out just for completeness. We just lived through this, the black and white note, and then we need to turn to Vatican II. Vatican II was considered by other popes, but summoned by John the 23rd because he wanted to open a window and let in some fresh air and some light. Numerous commissions had been appointed and many drafts have been drawn. But when it was time to vote on the committees, the cardinals and bishops from Africa and from the Middle East and from the Far East and from South America said, time out. Wait a second. We don't know these people. Let's hold a few meetings and a few conferences and have these people introduce themselves so that we can get to know them. So the makeup of the committees was totally changed by the bishops coming from third world countries. And many of the documents had to be rewritten. John the 23rd himself was dying of stomach cancer. But nevertheless, he wrote these two encyclicals, Mater et Magistra and Passion in Terris. The beauty of them was that they were not directed to the bishops. They were not directed to the Catholics. They were not directed to the pagans. They were directed to men of free will and goodwill. They were directed to others. He was in many ways the universal pontiff and recognized freedom of conscience and freedom of worship. Something none of the others would ever do. He died in 1963, and Pope Paul VI reconvened Vatican II. Pope Paul VI had been an ally of Pope Pius XII, but he was just too liberal. He tried to deal with Vatican II, in which was a struggle between the traditionalists and the progressives. The Vatican II came up with a number of documents, including 4 constitutions, and had the church engage, not condemn anything. The one thing about Vatican II that was unique was this universal call to holiness. Everybody, regarding of your religion, regarding of your location, regarding of your background, is called to holiness. No infallible pronouncements and a lot of criticism and a lot of reaction. Well, the open window allowed the storm to blow out the roof. The Catholic Church was no longer the one and only. It was no longer the Church of Jesus, but the people of God on a poorly defined journey, not knowing where they were going. There was no sense of mystery to Vatican II. So Vatican II changed things about rites. The altar was turned around, nuns' habits changed, the use of the vernacular was accepted in most churches, little things like that. The church became somewhat more liberal, but not quite as liberal as the liberals wanted. Paul VI made his biggest bugaboo with birth control. He wrote the encyclical Humanae Vitae in 1968, which indicated specifically that every act of sexual intercourse must be open to the transmission of life. In other words, any effort at preventing the transmission of life is sinful. There should be no artificial means of contraception. On the other hand, it's encyclical provided for the rhythm method. So no artificial means are approved, but a natural method of fooling nature is okay. You can just imagine how much reaction there was to this. There was shock, there was disappointment, there was dissent, particularly after coming after Vatican II, when Vatican II had really led the way to a new church. People were expecting the church to go, the Pope to say, look, some kinds of, yeah, it's all right. It's something private. You can deal with it at the local level, with your confessor. Deal with that. But no, he had to come out and say, bad, bad, bad all around. So it was really his Waterloo. And it was in the papers everywhere, Pope ban, bars, birth control, cartoons everywhere. Until he died in 1978. 1978 was the year of the three popes. John Paul I died after 33 days. And afterwards, John Paul II was elected as the first Polish pope in many years, if ever. Now, he had lived both under Nazis and communism, and he had been active in the theater. So he knew how to engage an audience, he knew how to speak, he knew how to smile, he knew how to gesture. He was quite liberal in his youth, but became very conservative in his maturity. Rumor has it, again, this is a rumor, that at the conclave, the senior cardinals went to him, Cardinal Wojtyla, and said, look, Cardinal, we want you to be Pope. We want you to be Pope because you are young, because you're Polish, because you are stable, you'd be Pope for many years, but you can't be liberal. You have to be conservative. Is that a deal or is that a deal? And Wojtyla said, all right, if that's what it takes, I'll be liberal. I mean, conservative. I mean, what do you want me to be? All right. That's only a rumor that he was appointed because he agreed to be conservative. He traveled extensively, and we all know about his history. He handled the Vatican Bank and the Ambrosiano scandal. He struggled with the Jesuits, particularly over liberation theology that we may need to skip. And he led a very active life. His showdown with the Sandinistas in Nicaragua is on tape, and it's on the internet, when he had to ask for silence, silence, silence. They would not let him deliver his homily. Vatican Bank was established in 1942, and the original $92 million from Mussolini grew to $1 billion in the 1930s. Marcinkus was the director for many years, and many Italians had privileged accounts. This was the equivalent of offshore accounts. And it was a major investor in the Banco Ambrosiano of Milan. Marcinkus was an American. He was like 6'5", an enormous man. He was more banker than cardinal. He said that you cannot give a pension in Hail Marys, very appropriately, and did not cooperate with U.S. Authorities. He skipped prison. Calvi was the chairman of the Banco Ambrosiano, which was a good Catholic bank in Milan. He used to take funds from the Vatican and move it from account to account. The bank had made some bad investments, but he covered those investments with monies from the Vatican Bank. He was also a Mason. He was a member of the Propaganda Due Lodge. And eventually he was caught. $1 billion were unaccounted for. He was sentenced to jail. He went to escape to England, hoping that his friends would help him out. But actually, his friends left him hanging. He was found under this bridge in London, hanging from the buttresses inside. And eventually the Vatican Bank settled with the Vatican, Ambrosiano. The Vatican Bank has been known to smuggle gold into Poland, fake charity accounts, money laundering for the underworld, for the mafia, and issuing bonds and stock certificates that were illegitimate too. So the Banco Ambrosiano and the Vatican Bank have both sinned. The Vatican Bank has also been accused of withholding benefits from Jews during the Holocaust, facilitating escape to South America, laundering money, hoarding gold. God knows what's beyond those towers. In any event, after the Pope died, Pope Benedict XVI, he did not have the charisma that the old Pope had. And he criticized American women, and eventually he resigned at age 86 because of poor health, and went on to live another 10 years. So much for poor health. A word about liberation theology. The social and political movement, both within Latin America, and the church kept going towards this socially oriented mission. Liberation theology was eventually discarded by the Catholic Church because it used Marxist theory. And it was a struggle between the poor and the elites. But the church did become actively engaged in improving the lives of the poor. That was Ratzinger, the Constitution. We know about Pope Francis that died not long ago. He also ran into trouble with some of his statements, irregular relationships, and spontaneous blessings of same-sex couples. The big problem now is China. China and the papacy do not have relationships, diplomatic relationships, and there are 9 million Catholics in China. Actually, the Chinese government nowadays nominates the bishops, and the Pope approves them or vetoes them. Actually, he approves them or keeps quiet and lets them go away. What is the future? This is the last line. And what are the predictions? The problems of the contemporary papacy have been described on the street as the pelvic problems.
Pelvic.
These include birth control, which personally, I think that sooner or later they will come to an agreement on birth control.
Okay. I mean, how come that hasn't been looked at? I mean, because I know that was at that time when that came out. Couldn't somebody, could this have been looked at sooner than now?
It was too controversial. They were afraid, they would be afraid of arriving at the same conclusion and undergoing the same kind of criticism.
They really felt that it
Yeah.
would be the same conclusion. I think there's a lot of Catholics over that issue.
It's interesting now, population replacement is actually going down. People think population is going up, but it's actually has to. And we're topping out at around 8 or 9 billion people. And the younger generations are not having children sufficient to replace people that are dying. So the population growth is actually telling off. In China, I forgot the actual date, but somewhere in the mid-century, it's forecast the population will be down about 800 million from 1.3 billion. So it's an interesting juxtaposition, having more children or not having more children.
Now, the question remains whether women priests will ever be allowed. I certainly hope so. The question of celibacy always arises. It's possible, but unlikely. But it exists in the Eastern Church. So it's possible.
So, there are some married Catholic priests.
Yeah, but they're not recognized by the papacy.
No, they're actually, and I'm trying to remember, you're an Anglican,
Yeah,
and you convert to Catholicism and you're married, you keep your wife,
yes.
she
Oh, I
passes
see.
away,
Yes, all right.
then you cannot remarry.
Right.
Right. So there is
Yes. Those do exist.
Case to be
There are
made.
loopholes.
Mine
Far and
is,
few in between, but yes, they do exist.
That should not be an issue because we have seen through all those. Numerous mistresses, but maybe that's the point, that they want to have multiple wives, not one, so.
No, keep the money in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Children.
Hopefully, someday the church and the papacy will allow divorced Catholics to return to the sacraments. It is unlikely that homosexuality will ever be accepted. At least not in the way it is. They do accept in seminaries people who are overt homosexuals.
Right. You just can't practice.
Gay marriage, unlikely. Probably never. Abortion, absolutely never. And pedophilia goes beyond canon law, that is civil law. So these are the issues that the papacy has continued to face and may or may not address in the future. That's the last slide. I'm sorry to keep you over. You wanted to. We would have discussed